Hi, welcome to Trail Buddy. We're continuing our bike build here. We're going to get into the fun stuff now. So we're actually putting parts and pieces back on. We've got the wiring monster behind us. Everything works. And now we're putting our final pieces on. I think today we'll get our gas tank. We can try to get our headlight bucket in, clean up some of our fenders, and some more parts and pieces. But yeah, now we actually look like we're making some progress. We got all the hard work done, and we'll go on to our next. So for our first piece here is we're going to set up our gas tank. So we've got our old original plastic gas tank. Everything's good. Cleaned it out. There's no nastiness inside. And we've got our fuel line set here. And we'll go through how to connect that in, fish it through, and the easiest way to do it, and how we connect the tubes here into this. And the most important thing is what we see quite often is people will get hose clamps, and this plastic here is pretty decent, but you can actually clamp it down hard enough to where you pinch off your fuel supply, and actually you're crimping these things closed. So we don't use that per se. The barbs usually work really good. What we end up doing is we get kind of a medium zip tie. We get our hose on there, and we'll zip tie it nice and tight. And then we're gonna want to mark which ones are, reserve versus on. And we'll dive into that. All right, let's connect up our fuel line. So we've got about 2 feet here, roughly. So we'll get these connected up and on. Now, if they're a little tight, which they should be tight, what I like to do is I will go grab a little bit of either like a lacquer thinner or a part spray cleaner, just put a little dab in there. That'll soften this up. And as that evaporates, the solvent, it'll go back to being tight. So I'll be able to get it on there easy and cinch it up. Okay, so I'm taking a little bit of lacquer thinner and I'm just lightly splashing the inside. And we'll give that a shot. This has always worked for me good in the past. All right, right on. So we've got our 3/16 line, and we've got a good snug fit. So I'm going to keep it connected, and I'm going to go do the other side here with just a little bit more lacquer thinner, just a little shot. And we'll get it onto our That's pretty good. I like to try to get, 3/16 or so past that last barb, just so I've got a nice landing that I can put my zip tie on. And we'll get that. We'll mount that on right now. Now, you don't got to go nuts. What we're just trying to do is a little bit of compression on there, so that way this does not, there we go, it's on there good, does not want to pull off. So we'll trim our tab, and we'll do the same thing here to our reserve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this roughly in the middle, and then I'm going to write an R on the side that I have my reserve line on. So that way I know when I go to cut it here, I don't know which one is my lower point, which will be the reserve, either left or right, whatever we want to pick. And then what's the higher point, which is just our fuel on. So we'll move over to that, and we'll figure out how to fish her through the frame. So we've got our line in here like thus. So I've got it marked which end that when I cut it is going to be my reserve line. And the trick is I'm going to want to fish this part in first, try to grab it with my left hand, and I've got my wires and everything kind of pulled back out of the way. That's why I didn't do my final mounting yet. So that way I could push this through and have its easiest access in here. So we'll start with this fuel line. And you're going to have to kind of point it down in the direction that you're going to want to go. And I'm going to shove that there so I can get it with my finger here into the V. So I've got it. Got my lines. I've got my front. So I'll just be able to fish her through. Like so. Now I can make sure that I don't have anything unplugged. We'll get that forward. You can always pull it back. All right, so that is how to put the gas tank in. Now we'll just leave this connected for now until we get ready to put our on-off switch in and our carburetor intake. We'll do that a little bit later. So we can just keep it connected. And we'll move on to some more parts and pieces. Quick note before I forget, we already have our fuel tank pads installed. The old ones on here were still pretty good. They still had the thickness that we needed, so that it holds it at the right height. And this tank still had a good rubber front isolator on the front of the tank, so that was all good. So before I go any further, some of you may run into this as like, why is my tank so floppy? And well, what you need to have that I didn't mention is just make sure that you've got that isolator on the front of the tank, which it kind of wraps around. It isolates it here in the frame. And then there's also two foam/rubber pads that are inside the frame that the gas tank sits on. So that gives it the right height and keeps it from moving around. So just one quick note before we moved on, so that way if you ran into that, you know what's happening when you're experiencing it. So we're on to our gas tank bracket. So unfortunately with this bike that we started with, it was totally missing the gas tank bracket. So the thing that you're going to find with the plastic gas tank versus the metal gas tank is the filler neck is slightly smaller in outside diameter. So everything that we have available, and we'll put it in here and we'll show you how much play it has, but everything that we can get is for the steel tank. So we're going to utilize the steel tank bracket with the grommet, and we'll show you the difference. It's got a little bit of play, but it's definitely better than nothing. And like I said, this bike didn't have anything, so this is better than nothing at all. So we'll get this mounted with our grommet. We'll go ahead and put this in first. So we got a rubber grommet mounted. We got our tank roughly where it needs to go. And there. So with our decent isolators that we have on the front and below the gas tank, it actually doesn't really allow it to move very much. Especially if we pull it maybe towards the back a little bit, favor that. And maybe we'll do a little bit of looking too. We'll see if we can't find a different kind of grommet that's available. We'll check out some different sources that we have. But for right now, this seems to be pretty decent. I'm going to go grab our M6 here for our bracket. We'll leave the seat bolts for next time, because what we're going to have to do too is before we get this fully mounted, we're going to have to take this back off to get our nice chrome strip on. But before we put the chrome strip on, we've got to put our decals on. So we're going to put this one on. We'll just loosely hand fit it, so that way we can move on to our battery bracket. We can get that adjusted to fit nicely and go from there. So I'm going to go grab some more M6 fasteners and we'll continue on. Okay, we're on to our battery box. So these particular battery boxes are designed to mount and work with a clone. So for the price point that we're getting these for, it's really a pretty decent price, but we got to do a little tweaking to make it work. So what I did is I grabbed a vice grips and I grabbed the bracket here and then bent it as far back as I could to where I'm just almost hitting the gas tank and they still line up. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that battery to be forward and down so we miss our stock seat and we don't have to put any spacers in here to try to shim it up. So what I did again is I grabbed my channel locks, grabbed it onto the side. Now I adjusted it to where it just kind of clamped it onto it. And I take it and I bent it back probably 15, 20 degrees. But what I was really doing is I was bending my first side here and then bringing it to where the hole lines up. And I was looking at my gas tank and the front of the battery bracket. And I'm going to go absolutely as far as I can with the vice grips. And then I'm going to go grab a piece of coal roll rod and do the final tweaking. But on the bottom here, what we're going to do is we're also going to mount our electric start relay. So what I think we're going to have to do, since we had to bend this so far forward, is we'll probably get it to where the terminals are facing towards the back, but we should be fine because I've got about 3 layers of protection here. I've got the original covers that are on the end of each wire, and I've got the hard rubber cover that comes with the electric start relay, and I took some black tape, rolled it around a couple times just to keep everything in place so that way it wouldn't arc out. So on the bottom here, you'll find these tabs, and on the starter relay itself, it'll have a corresponding mating plastic or rubber piece. So sometimes these little tabs get bent in shipping, so you just have to make sure you open that up a little bit so that way you can fit the rubber over that. And we'll get that mounted. Slide it over that tab. Boom. All right, so we've got this piece here. We're going to want to make sure that we can still get at our ground for our battery, and that we've got our fuse box holder in a good spot, and that we can also get at our positive mount. So we're looking good there. Make sure that's up about here. All right, so we'll get our M6 bolts started. I did some heavy tweaking on this bracket, so I'm going to do a little pushing to get these in there. All right, that is a big difference. So we are down as far as we can. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to start punching this over until I'm just going to hit that gas tank. And I'm going to be mindful of that starter solenoid to make sure I don't have hard pressure on the frame. So that those little tab mounts put it probably in the perfect little spot there. So we're kind of isolated from either our gas tank and our bottom part of the frame there. So grab, and I've got these just started. Grab this bar, hammer, and we'll do the final little movement forward. There we go. A little more on this side. All right, got it. So I'm tapping on the battery cradle inside the battery box, and also the little mounts here to try to get that battery down and as far as I can. So the reason the clones make this is the stock, they're the seats that are on the clones, they're dished in quite a bit more to clear the battery. Now, with our nice reproduction seat that looks like the originals for the earlier bikes, these are all mirrored after the original seat pan. So what that means is we don't have near as much clearance as they do with the clone setup that we do not have with our stock style seat. So that's why we got to tweak that quite a bit to move that thing forward and down so that way we can clear everything. So I got my battery, put that in there. Got some tape over my positive. I'm going to bring this down to make sure. Now, one thing that I like to do is, let's say I was going to be doing my final mounting on this, is I like to get these screws here that hold this seat down to where it's almost tight. So that way when I bring her down this way, I can tweak it left and right and get it in line. And then I can get these rubber pads mounted onto these metal mounting points for the rubber pads. We'll check our clearance. We'll see how we did. All right, we'll get a flashlight, we'll double check, but it looks like we've got plenty of room now. And with us using the battery as a side terminal mount, that's even better. So I might give it one more tap just to make sure that I'm down as far as I can. And then we'll mount our, do our final connection rather to our harness. And we'll move on to that now. All right, on to more fun stuff, bolting things on. So we've got our old headlight bucket here, which has seen better days, roached. And I was so worried about, we were trying to find an original one this color. I mean, good luck, I guess. There's none left out there. But we do have these replacement ones online. And working with paint so much, the chances of this matching, I was like, man, there's no way this is going to match. But you can obviously tell this one's really, really faded, the original. And, you know, this looks pretty dark, I think, because it's uniform. These old original candy colors, they are not uniform whatsoever. Plus, there's fade added to it. But I think as you put it in there, I think it matches pretty good for what we're gonna do. And I believe we've got these, and we've got them in the topaz here. I think it's a blue and red for sure. So those are other ones we have available. But we're gonna put this in. Before we do that, though, we're gonna mount our frame or our horn to our lower part of the frame on the triple tree set. So that way we can get at it easy. And then we'll put our headlight bucket in and our puller wires through, because what I want to do is I want to be able to hook up my horn, and then also highlight a nice new product that we came up with to help mount the 12-volt horn versus the old school. So we'll go into that detail in a minute. We'll show you what that is and how that'll mount and why it's better. All right, now we're on to where we're going to mount our 12-volt horn. So previous horns that we can get that work really well, that are a pretty good price and look really nice, have a really universal mounting style here. So what we've been doing in the past is we've been taking this bracket here, bending it 90 degrees, put it on the bike. It works. It's a solution, but it doesn't look very nice. So what we came up with is we went over to my 3D printer, kind of like we did in one of the previous videos where we were working on the CDI box. And we printed it up. This is our second version. So we started one a little bit taller. But we've got our nice little plastic. This is a prototype. This isn't what we're going to be using for the real life, but this helped us with our fitment. Made sure that we cleared the headlight bucket and everything. So we started out with a couple of these little plastic pieces. And the idea is we can get rid of this bracket and have it look like something that's more stock. So what we came up with in the end is a really nice stainless steel bracket here that'll mount to the back side of that horn. And it's got a little non-rotation tab and mounts right to the back of this. So we'll have this available as an assembly, as a kit here in the future, but we're going to give it our first official install on our Resto Mod bike right here. So we're going to get this mounted to this, and we'll show it how it fits in the bike, and we'll get it all hooked up. All right, we've got our bracket mounted to our horn here, a new Trail Buddy bracket. So you'll see that it has elongated holes. So this will work with the OEM triple tree mount or the clone triple tree mount. So if you want something that looks a little bit more original, and let's say you're using our 30mm disc brake assembly, this will also work on there and clear the headlight bucket. So the reason we're doing this now is we want to stay away from or get this mounted before we start putting our headlight bucket on. You can always kind of adjust that around, but for now we're going to mount that here. So we still got to clean up our front fender, but I just want to make sure that I've got enough room to feed this through the headlight bucket. And it would be nice if these were on here, even if it's just temporary, as a placeholder, so the horn doesn't swing around on me as I'm working on that headlight bucket, so we don't scratch our nice new headlight bucket. that on. No, that's just temporary. And now we will move on to our headlight bucket. So when we did our tear down, we took all of our fasteners out. We put it all into one box. And that was kind of important now because what we wanted to do is, as we've got our reproduction bucket here, we still got to take these little metal strengthening tabs, and we'll put that inside the headlight bucket here. So that way we don't crack the plastic. Get that aligned. We'll snap that in. All right. Use screwdriver here as my little awl to line the holes up. And those are nice because that gives it some backing and some support. So that way we don't crack the new headlight bucket when we start tightening down the fasteners. So what I like to do is I'll run a nice flange bolt through here. And then on the back side, I'll use a nylock, because that way when I go to put this on, I can still adjust it after the fact later without having to, because we put our headlight on, we're going to lose access to those fasteners. So we'll get this in, and then we'll get our nylock started. And I will tighten those down later, but for right now, I'm going to bring it right to where the nylock starts. And after this, we'll start fishing our wires through the top hole in the back of the headlight bucket. And then we will install our speedometer next. So that's a little bit easier to put in than it is to take. It's a lot easier to put in than to take out. So I'll start fishing the wires through. The headlight bucket is it is the main junction box for all of the connections. And that's where all the main wires, so your high-low switch on your handlebar, your horn, and now with this one, well, also I unplugged our electric start switch because I'll have to fish that through too, because we'll want that connection to take place in the headlight bucket as well. So I'll get these fished in. Pretty much pulling everything in here except the horn connection. And as we mount our headlight bucket, our handlebars, we can fish all of our wires and our connections through into our headlight bucket. So here we've got plenty of room. We're missing our horn. And we'll tighten up those nylocks to where I could just barely move it. So that way I can still adjust this after I get everything buttoned up and still be able to move it. So I'll grab my speedometer next. We'll get that cleaned up. I think this is probably a good spot to stop. We'll make sure that we've got this loom pulled in the headlight. We may want to push this. I left a little bit of room to push that back. If we got to feed a little bit more back into the frame, we could throw a little WD-40 on that grommet, or take the grommet out, pull the grommet back, feed a little wire back in. Then we should be good. So what we'll do next in the next video is we'll go over our chrome fenders. We'll clean up this mess in the back. In the long story, we end up usually just painting this a silver. And on the face of it, we've got some nice steel wool, and we'll polish this back up. We'll be careful not to take the chrome off and get into the steel. But we've also located a nice rear fender, because this bike didn't come with one. And we'll get that cleaned up all at the same time. And we'll get even a little bit further, and maybe we'll work onto the cartridges. We'll get our frame final mounted too, and maybe we'll make a little checklist and we'll go through everything that we've got to finish before we're done. So that'll conclude this part of this video. If you like what you see, these parts and pieces, check us out on mytrailbuddy.com. Thanks for watching.